Live. Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to this Angus Council. Before we start, I'd just like to remind people we have got a long agenda today, and we want to get through our business. So I could please ask you to, remember the rules. One question, one comment, and let's get through the business as we hope. Have we got any apologies for absence, please, Fiona?
Yes, Provost, we've got apologies from Councillors Brown, Councillors Davey and Councillor Stack.
Thank you. Two declarations of interest. I remind colleagues of the terms of the Councillor's Code of Conduct for interest. Councillor McMillan Douglas.
Thank you, Provost. I want to declare an interest, please, in respect of item 11. I realise that item 11 is a discussion of national, but as I am about to submit a planning application for a single house for my own retirement, and as it is not possible for me to say with certainty that this proposed framework will not have an impact on my planning application, although I have been advised that there is not any requirement for me to do so, I think it best to declare an interest and withdraw from the discussion and not take part in any vote on this item.
Thank you, McMillan Douglas. Are there any other declarations of interest? Thank you. We'll now move on to item 3, the minutes of council and committees. 3.1, the minutes of council meeting. You could see the minutes before you. Do we agree the minutes?
Agreed.
And 3.2, minutes of committees are all for noting. Are they noted?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 4 is a notice of motion by Councillor Moore regarding the Freecombe Health Centre. Councillor Moore, have you got a seconder?
I do. Councillor Lumger is seconding.
Thank you very much. Councillor Moore, can you present your motion? Remember, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. Provost, members, the announcement that the last doctor at Freecombe Health Centre is giving up the post has caused great alarm, not only in Freecombe but in the surrounding area also. If the Freecombe health facilities are allowed to close, where will patients go? Freecombe is one of only 15 NHS doctors' practices in the whole of Angus, and it's also possibly the most rural. Travel to Freecombe from nearby villages such as Letham, which is only a 10-minute bus ride away. Where can they go, especially if they are reliant on public transport? The only regular bus service which goes through Freecombe is the Service 27 from Forfar to Arbroath. This considerably limits choice. Freecombe to Forfar is 27 minutes. Freecombe to Arbroath is 15 minutes. Freecombe and the surrounding rural area is presently getting an excellent service, albeit in a building outgrown by the increased population. A decade ago, there was a glimmer of hope that a new health centre was possible, but that hasn't come to fruition. As the population has grown, the strain on the health centre and the health staff working in the building has increased. We are all aware of the strain on the health service, the national shortage of doctors, the ageing workforce, and young people not seeing the health service as a career of choice. It is not unexpected that the places are most attractive to the younger element of the NHS staff. Action must be taken to address this concern, as the loss of NHS facilities will force people to travel to see a healthcare professional, force people to travel for treatment, and deter people from getting attention if they don't feel well enough to travel. If we truly serve the residents of Angus, all the residents of Angus, we have to seek a prompt resolution to this issue. We need to be a critical friend to NHS Tayside, asking the necessary questions, but also working as part of the team finding a solution. I urge you to support the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moore. Councillor Lumgear, you wish to second the motion?
Yes, thank you, Provost. Yes, I am happy to second Councillor Moore's motion.
Thank you. Colleagues, have we got any questions or any comments? Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Provost. I have a question, but I might then have a comment afterwards, if that's all right.
That's a good question.
Yeah, the question is, is this motion in relation to the actual physical building, Councillor Moore, or to the provision of primary healthcare services?
This is to the provision of the primary healthcare services.
Okay, so could I make a comment then, Provost?
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah. This situation was first brought to my attention just a few days after the GP had actually indicated, given their notice of intention to retire. And this is a perfectly normal and natural for GPs to follow. The Angus Health and Social Care Partnership is already working through that process with local services to address this, to make sure that the statutory duty to provide primary healthcare services continues for patients covered by this practice. So I'm not sure this motion is bringing new to the table or to the discussion. I'm comfortable that the processes are being worked through as a member of the Angus Health and Social Care Partnership, which hosts GP primary care services for all 3 IGBs in Tayside.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Bell. Councillor Miles?
Thank you, Provost. No, I totally recognise the problem that Freakham Health Centre is in, and the problem that all rural areas in Angus and the whole of Scotland have in recruiting GPs. It is a serious lack and shortage of GPs that is contributing to this problem. And those that are recruited, again, as it was said, tend to favour the more urban areas. So we need to, I would say, extend this motion a little and write to the Scottish Government to see if they can extend and improve the training of GPs so that we have enough to satisfy all the areas in Scotland. I mean, we have this situation elsewhere in Angus and elsewhere in Tayside, and it's not an easy problem to resolve. And I'm not sure that either the NHS Tayside or Health and Social Care Partnership can magic up GPs from anywhere other than trying to attract them from the general body from the training. But there's not enough being trained is the biggest problem. So we should maybe extend this to write to Scottish Parliament as well to seek an urgent increase in the training of GPs. Thank you.
Okay. On Councillor Moore's motion, you notice at the bottom it says that, you know, we Angus Council resolve to request the Chief Executive to convey to the Chair of the NHS Tayside the concerns of councillors. That's the sort of meat of that thing. Councillor King.
Thank you, Provost. I don't know how many more of my colleagues, councillor colleagues, caught First Minister's questions on the television at lunchtime. There was quite a bit of time spent discussing the Rye Hill one in Dundee and the Freakham practice, and both Hamza Youssef and other MSPs were in discussion on these matters. So the Scottish Parliament is already aware of the problem.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Hans.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Can I just maybe ask Gail Smith, I think I heard her joining, given that the medical centres in Freakham, is there the potential of a GP who's based elsewhere in Angus could actually come to provide some GP services within Freakham.
Okay, can we answer that question, Ms Smith?
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. Yes, I'm listening to the discussion here, and Councillor Bell is absolutely correct. We do have a working group already in progress with key individuals involving the Health and Social Care Partnership and primary care services from across NHS Tayside. We've got weekly meetings underway, and potential options have been developed, Councillor Hans, and are being considered at the moment.
Thank you very much, Mr Smith. Councillor Fairweather. Councillor Fairweather.
Right. Thank you, Provost. Well, so I do agree with Councillor Bell's comments. I'm surprised that the members are basically asking questions of this. This motion is simply all it's doing is it affirms the problems that are in Freakham at this present time. The motion at the bottom is it's fairly simple. It's asking Angus Council resolves the request and that the Chief Executive write to NHS Tayside regarding the loss of the health facilities in Freakham and express the Council's support for an early resolution. I don't see why any member here today would go against this motion, and I will certainly be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fairweather. Councillor Macmillan Douglas.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I also am very concerned about GP practices across Angus, actually. We've had various discussions about problems with inadequate GP services. I've got no doubt that lots of people are wringing their hands, but I think the time has come for this council to show that it's really concerned about this particular GP practice and therefore carry out the action stipulated in the motion of getting the Chief Executive to write to the Chair of NHS Tayside.
Thank you very much, Councillor Macmillan Douglas. Councillor Whiteside.
Thank you, Provost. Just for the avoidance of doubt, I mean, I don't think there's anybody at all in this chamber that disagrees with the intention of this motion. I think we would all agree that would like to see a resolution as soon as possible. I think Councillor Bell was just pointing out it may not be directed at the correct place, and that's a completely valid point. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Whiteside, Councillor Hans, you've had a question. This is your comment, and that's it.
A comment, Provost. Yeah, it was just to say that, you know what, and again, just following on what Councillor Whiteside has said, I don't think I've heard anybody suggesting that we're not going to support the motion, but as councillors, we have the right to ask any question we like, and it's our role to do so, and it is just about getting some clarity, that's all.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hans. Yeah, the point taken. Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Provost. I would ask Councillor Moore if you would accept that it's not NHS Tayside this should be going to, but it is the Angus Health and Social Care Partnership it should be going to. And that would just be, if you could just accept that and incorporate that into the resolution, or the motion rather, I think that would make just that bit more sense. And then Gail Smith can reply with, you know, giving him detail, of giving the Chief Executive rather details of what's actually going on. Would that be okay, do you think?
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Moore.
Yes, this motion has been discussed with NHS Tayside and the Angus Health and Social Care Partnership, and it is a motion, the discussions of all three. And this was the motion that was decided on where the discussion should be.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Devine?
That wasn't made clear, and it would be quite good if it was actually incorporated then into it. Angus, you know, Chair of NHS Tayside and the Chief Executive of the Angus Health and Social Care Partnership, is thing which would make it more clear.
Councillor Moore, are you happy to include that? Is it just
That can be included if members wish.
It's more or less what you're saying. Councillor Boyd.
Yes, thank you, Provost. Yeah, I have to just say, look, no one was disagreeing with this, but we've just now heard from Councillor Moore that he's been in negotiations with all these 3 different people already. So I just get a little confused, therefore, why we needed a motion brought forward, because it then in turn makes it very confusing for the electorate. We've all got problems in every single borough. Yes, I totally agree that out in the rural areas is worse, but the other smaller places have this problem as well. And this does not help any councillor, all 28 of us, if we bring motions forward this way, because I've got the same problem in Carnoustie. We've got loads of retiring general practitioners. And now my mailbag will be full with people saying, look, what are you doing here about this, Councillor Boyd? Where I have to usually honestly say to people, it's back to what Councillor Bez said. The council have provided the building. The building is big enough and large enough for Carnoustie, as the case may be. I'm using Carnoustie as the example, but we have a problem that is not for us to be trying to sort out as councillors, but we can try and sort it out behind the scenes. Hence the reason why I don't see why we needed to bring this forward as a motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Boyd. I mean, I think that Councillor Moore's idea is actually just to bring this out in the open, and everybody has actually made, you know, very relevant points. But I think this is really just putting it out, putting it on an official basis, and I think it's a marker on the table. And I think you know, every one of us here, all elected members, I'm sure could support that. Okay, are there any other comments? Right, Councillor Moore, would you like to sum up?
Yes, thank you. I can just very briefly, Councillor Boyd, they're not negotiations. They were discussions as to how to negotiations about how to resolve it. As Councillor Hans says, it's our role to ask questions, and I'm doing that here. I wasn't aware of a working group being in existence. Perhaps if these working groups included local members or kept local members informed, then we wouldn't be asking the questions because we would have some information. But having said that, Freakham has a problem. A decade ago, there was a solution. It wasn't taken up, and we now have a problem where we have a cramped building. It's not the best place to be. It's not going to attract doctors to come to it. And I would just like to know what's being done to get a speedy resolution.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Moore. Colleagues, the motion is laid down and added in the word that was suggested by Councillor Devine. Do we agree to move that motion?
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you. If we can now move on to item 5, which is the Adult Protection Committee Annual Report 2020 to 2021. Now, I was going to ask Mr. Ewan West to lead on this and give an overview. Unfortunately, Mr. West hasn't managed to join us yet. Could I maybe ask the Chief Executive at very, very short notice, I'm afraid, to maybe just give a wee quick overview before we question and discuss the paper. Mrs. Williamson, would you be happy to do that?
Certainly, Provost, happy to do that, and at the Scrutiny and Audit Committee. So I'll be brief, and I've got letters to write, obviously. That was a joke. Okay, so yeah, before you is the Adult Protection Committee Annual Report. It was approved by the committee, the Angus Adult Protection Committee on the 8th of December, and the Chief Officers Group, of which I'm a member, on the 24th of January. Members should note that there's been a significant protection activity over 2020-2021, a 79% increase, really 728 referrals in comparison to what's been a consistent average of 400. So the referrals have been growing, and it can be looked at in a couple of ways. It could be looked at as a consequence of the pandemic, but it could also be looked at as a consequence of us being far better at signposting people to know what to do when they're concerned about an adult. So we're looking into that. We're noticing an increase in referrals of people experiencing mental health difficulties. Not so surprising, you may think. The number of areas where learning and development and improvements include learning from our initial case reviews and our significant case reviews, engaging and listening with those with lived experience, and we are already implementing some of the learning as is outlined in the report. Now, I know George Bowie's here, Gail Smith's here, and Catherine Lindsay's here as the Chief Social Work Officer, and any of us are happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ewan West's hand up.
Ewan West has appeared. Do you want to add anything what the Chief Executive said, Ewan?
Thanks, Provost. I was here. I don't know how you were not seeing or hearing me, but anyway, the Chief Executive has eloquently given quite a good summary. Just all I wanted to add, Provost, to that was clearly the increase in the number of referrals is a concern, but it may be a positive as well as a negative. I think we're seeing some evidence of the impact on mental health as a result of lockdown and COVID that is now coming through with vulnerable adults. The point that the Chief Executive made about learning from reviews absolutely needs to be done without question, and we're well on the route to looking to see how we could improve our response to vulnerable adults and ensure that we mitigate, if not completely eradicate, the risks that are presented by these people. So, yeah, happy to take any questions going forward, Provost.
Thank you very much, Ewan. Okay, we've got a question from Councillor Whiteside.
Thank you, Provost. It was more a point of clarity for perhaps members of the public who might be watching. As the Chief Executive alluded to, the report, as well as the next one on the agenda, has been already to Scrutiny and Audit Committee, and it was very fully discussed and scrutinised, and it's just to reassure members of the public we're not just skipping over this. We wouldn't want to repeat all the questions and discussion that we've already had on the papers. So just wanted to make that clear.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Whiteside. Councillor Speed, what is your question?
Yeah, thanks, Provost, and yeah, just echo Councillor Whiteside's words there, because, you know, I certainly have had plenty of opportunity to look over these reports and ask questions, and so the question that I do have maybe doesn't feel too significant, but it was just seeking clarity with regards to the report on page. It says no further action on point 3 and 4 for those that live outside Angus Council. So point 3 lives outside Angus Council, and then 4 lives out with Angus Council. And I'm not sure if it's just something I've overlooked before, but I just wondered what the difference was there.
Okay, Councillor Speed. I see George Bowie's hands up, so I think, is that you giving an answer, George, is it?
Yes, thanks, Provost. That's actually an error, and it was picked up in Scrutiny and Audit. I understand that a very short list of amendments was attached with the papers for members. That should be one of them that we've corrected, Councillor Speed. So.
Okay,
it should only be one, and it's the same thing.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for that.
Question answered.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Are there any comments? Okay, colleagues, thank you very much. Do we agree the recommendations in paragraph 1? Councillor Speed, your hand's up, or is that a new hand?
Sorry, it was a new one, sorry.
Oh, come on in quickly.
Yeah, it would just be very quick. Like I say, I've had a good chance to look over the report and really note the concern around the increase in referrals. But I think I just wanted to kind of comment on, I guess, the increase coming from carers, and just to see that this week I have been, I guess, reassured around the PR and engagement that's been circulating with regards to the health and social care recruitment, looking to increase our workforce capacity. So I just would hope that would go some way in kind of, I guess, addressing a lot of the adult protection concerns as well.
Okay, thank you. George Bowie, do you want to reply?
Yes, I would say that just to provide some reassurance, that has been very challenging, the increase in the number of referrals, because obviously they all have to be responded to and examined, and a proportion of those will go forward to become formal adult protection investigations, and you need specially trained staff to do those within the care management teams. So we are increasing the number of care managers using some of the new Scottish Government monies that are coming through. So that's underway, and we are recruiting, and we've also moved to have 2 adult protection officers now within the partnership instead of 1. So we've doubled the resource in there. So we are increasing capacity to try and manage the increases.
Okay, thanks very much. Happy with that, Councillor Speed?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, I'll go back to the recommendations. Do we agree the recommendations laid out in paragraph 1?
Agreed.
Thank you. If we move on to item 6, colleagues, item 6 is the Angus Violence Against Women Partnership Annual Report 2020 to 21. This was actually discussed and considered at the Scrutiny and Audit Committee on the 1st of March. So, Ewan, do you want to read on again on this?
Thank you, Provost. Yes, this is the first annual report that has been produced by the Angus Against Violence Against Women Partnership, and when I came into post as independent chair at the beginning of last year, I was very keen that we produce a report to allow yourselves as councillors and members of the public to see what the partnership was doing and where we were looking to develop our work, and to make sure that the group was performing its role as a strategic group within Angus, multi-agency, and looking at this fairly significant area of work. So I'm pleased to present the first annual report. I'll not go through it all. There are a number of positives in there. We now have all our subgroups up and running. Most importantly, the self-evaluation and continuous improvement subgroup, which has quite a bit of work ahead of it. We're working very quickly to produce meaningful data that can be examined, which will help us identify priorities going forward. And in the report, you'll see there's a page where we set out the strengths and challenges going forward. White ribbon, the white ribbon process is certainly one that is very much in the forefront of our minds across Angus, and we have a number of events coming up to support that strategy, or that part of the whole strategy rather. Our big drive, and certainly from the chair, is prevention. We need to prevent. If we can't prevent, then we'll continually have to react, and we don't want to react. We don't want these instances of gender-based violence to happen at all. So we need to prevent them. And part of the mainstay of White Ribbon is obviously the involvement of men and boys to support the work of violence against women, and to call out instances where they see that happening and address the problem. So that is very much major tranche of the work going forward. But there are also a number of other preventative actions that we're looking to take. But I think just to finish on, I don't want to finish on a negative, but gender-based violence across the board, there's all different aspects to it. But I think we should not underestimate abuse that is ongoing and will be ongoing. And it just, I mean, I don't think I'm quite that naive, but actually, I'm actually shocked and surprised by the amount of opportunity there is there for people to groom others and those who are most at risk. And obviously that comes with more concerns going forward. So there's a lot of work to be done, not just locally, but nationally and internationally around all that that type of gender-based violence. But I just finish off by advising elected members that the group is very much functioning. It's a strong group. It gets very good attendance at meetings. We're expanding the membership to make sure that we have all the right people around the table, and I look forward to producing an even more positive report for year 2. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Ewan, and it's good, positive stuff. Councillor Bell, you have a question?
I have a comment, actually, Provost, if that's all right.
Before you go on with your comments, are there any questions? Councillor Dunn, was that a question?
Your report, where can women actually see your help and report? I mean, do you have any literature in schools or supermarkets, or, you know, if someone's actually physically being hurt at the moment and they don't want to call the police, where can they get help from yourselves right now if they needed it?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, well, there are various pieces of literature in libraries, doctors' surgeries, council buildings, various public areas where they can pick up that information. There's lots of information available online, either from local sources or national sources. And obviously all of the specialist agencies, Women's Aid, etc., they also have information available in their offices and online as well, Councillor. So it's always something we're looking to expand and make sure we can get as much information out there as possible.
Yeah, I think that would be good if it could maybe put in areas where maybe mother and babies are, or hubs, etc. Because it's not a thing some people would like to admit to, you know, and openly look online where maybe the abuser could see they were looking at it. So I think that's something that needs to be more in the public domain. Okay, thank you.
Yes, it's a balance about what's online and what's available as a physical pickup. Absolutely.
Provost, my comment can actually help Councillor Durno, if you would allow me to come in at this point. Thank you very much. Brenda, you've not been reading my social media this week.
Councillor Moore, have you got a question or a comment?
Yes, Provost.
Comment, a question?
Question.
No, not a question. Okay, Councillor Bell.
No, it's a question.
It is a question. Okay.
Yes.
I beg your pardon. That's a question.
Yes, Mr. West, are you connecting with the police on the Ask Angela campaign? Are you aware of it?
Yes, we are linking in with the police on that campaign, and the police are part of the multi-agency group, yeah, all the other agencies link in with the police on that. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Go on, give your broadcast.
Thank you very much. Well, it was International Women's Day on Tuesday, so I would be remiss not to talk to this report. I have had the opportunity to scrutinise it at Scrutiny and Audit Committee, and I just wanted to reinforce my gratitude that the partnership has been in existence for some considerable years now, but this linking into the reporting structures of the council is actually a significant development for it, and it allows elected members to see the scale of the issue in our communities. And as a direct result of COVID and this deepening of partnership working, I'm really pleased that we were able to launch Angus Women's Centre this week, which addresses Councillor Durno's point. It's a virtual resource. It's been funded through the council but led by the third sector. So if you were to Google, or other search engines are available, Angus Women's Centre, you will be able to see that virtual gateway to lots of different services that women can access, and it has a quick exit button as well to address the issue that you raised there. There will be, in fact, we're developing a physical space as well at the Cross, the VAA headquarters, and there are plans to move it around Angus so that women can access services closer to their homes. This is not about spending more money on new services, it's about making it easier to access the services that are there for women in a safe way and for women-only spaces. So I hope that addresses your question there, and I would encourage you to share news of that. And just finally, to thank the Angus Violence Against Women Partnership for all that it does and how effectively those working relationships are progressing. I'm hugely grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bell. And thanks, Mr. West, for all the information. Colleagues, are the recommendations in paragraph 1, are they agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. We'll now move on to item 7, Arbroath, a place for everyone, an update and procurement authority. I'm going to ask the Ian Cochrane to introduce this report. Mr. Cochrane.
Thank you, Provost. And indeed, the report gives you, as you said, an update and quite a lot of detail in that update of the progress we've been making on the project. But it also seeks procurement approval through a framework contract called SCAPE, and on the basis that the contract is above my delegated authority. I would note, as per recommendation 4, that a further report will come back to communities in due course. So the report is before you, and as I say, we're looking for procurement authority. Walter Scott, who's very much led the project, is also on the call today if members have any specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cochrane. Councillor Fairweather, do you wish to, as an Arbroath member, want to say something?
Yes, right. First, can I just say I'm delighted that Arbroath, a place for everyone, was in both the administration and SNP budgets, and was by all members at that meeting agreed. You know, a lot has been said about this particular project, mostly about, especially on social media, about the emergency services having a problem, and it was only a cycle path. That's not the case. This is a Scottish Government initiative, and I have to say, a very good one, and it's moving forward. And for the health and well-being of our citizens, and for cutting carbon emissions, this is a way forward, for not just for Arbroath, but for the whole of the country. Page 125 says this will create an exemplary walking and cycling route, restoring accessibility in the town that for 40 years and more has disconnected this town. It will provide reduced air pollution, enhance well-being, giving equality to all, and provide good quality enhanced open green space. It will rejuvenate the town of Arbroath, but it will also give, working with Sustrans, further vision on how all of Angus will benefit from this type of project in the future with further funding. And I commend the recommendations and will move as such. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fairweather. Any questions? Councillor Speed.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. Yeah, just under point 7 and the risk implications, it states that the final designs will be based around an affordable cost envelope taken into account. the percentage of Sustrans funding available and councils. I can't argue with that. However, I am seeking assurances that any changes to design do not limit our ability to maximise accessibility for all. Much focus has been on cycling and vehicle use. However, in particular, I'm thinking about pedestrian access and their experience, as ultimately, whether walking or wheeling, this is something that most, if not all of us, need to do, even when our journey is accompanied by other modes of travel and transport. So just seeking some assurances around that, and also some further clarity with regards to the tendering process and what consideration will be given to local employment opportunity and wider community benefit.
Councillor Speed, thank you. One question, you're about half a dozen there. Mr. Cochrane.
Thanks. I think if I could bring in Walter at this point, please, Provost. He has the detail and being involved in the procurement.
Okay, Walter.
Through you, Provost. Yes, thanks for the questions. The reassurance really is no higher than the ultimate aim of the project is to create an exemplary walking and cycle route accessible to all. So the assurance is there within the main aspiration of the project that this is, as has been said earlier, not just a cycling route. This is an exemplary walking and cycling route accessible for all, and it is about connecting. So hopefully that gives Councillor Speed some assurance. In respect of the process, if the SCAPE approach is followed, is that the early contractor involvement will develop. Information will be shared with that contractor who are specialists in this field, and that the costs. What they ensure that they do within that is through the client as the council to identify local suppliers, local contractors, and therefore the majority of the work will be undertaken by local suppliers and local contractors, and therefore that does allow us the benefit of ensuring that much of our apprentices, our carbon neutral agenda can be brought to bear within that cost. But the use of the term envelope is really quite important in that it's only so big, and therefore the budget within that envelope, the target is to deliver the exemplary project without exceeding that envelope.
Thank you very much for that very full explanation. Are you happy with that, Councillor Speed?
Yep, thank you, Provost. Thanks for answering my questions, Mr. Scott.
One question, Councillor Devine. Sorry, Chris.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, it may be a kind of operational question, this, but when we saw the fly-through, which looked great, actually, there was a huge amount of planting. And I'm just wondering how our Parks Department's going to deal with all of this. Clearly, a lot of it will be low maintenance, but nevertheless, I hope that they've been involved in discussions all the way along the line here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Scott.
Through you, Provost. Yeah, yes, our Parks colleagues have been involved right the way through the process. We are very keen that where there are opportunities for communities to take responsibility and take control over the available spaces, particularly the landscape spaces, we're wishing to do that, and we've had some good initial discussions on that. So yes, there is a reallocation of the road space. Some of it will go from blacktop to grassed areas and vegetated areas, and we're very conscious that we do need to limit the amount of maintenance required for those, and therefore it will be in general pretty low maintenance landscaping that we'll be using. But as I say, ultimately we're hopeful that some of the spaces would be available for local community groups and volunteers to take charge of in terms of what would be planted there and how that would be maintained.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just follow up, Provost? Sorry. Sometimes planting is when there's road maintenance going on, and there's salt sprayed, and there's some weed killing going on. The planting doesn't survive very well. So I hope that there's going to be lots of recommendations put in there for that.
Mr. Scott.
I can assure Councillor Devine that that there is a degree of scrutiny in terms of the species that would be actually introduced. Invariably, there would be local and Scottish species in that regard, and their robustness to deal with the environment will include what we might see in terms of spray and salt and whatnot and debris coming out from the road. So yes, we would seek to ensure that all of the landscaping is the correct landscaping for the environment.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Durno.
Mine's as a comment, Provost. Do you want to take somebody else?
Hang on a wee minute, Councillor Durno. Any other questions? Councillor Duff, your question?
Yes, thanks, Provost. A question, really just trying to cut through some of the jargon. On page 118, when I think we've probably seen this before, this optimism bias, I'm assuming this has got something to do with our confidence that the project will hit financial targets. But if someone could give us a brief and simple explanation of what it actually is referring to, that would be helpful.
Thank you. Mr. Scott.
Thank you for the challenging question. Optimism bias is in essence a risk allocation. It's for uncertainty. It's something that comes directly from UK and national guidance in respect of how we manage capital and infrastructure projects, that you have to make an allowance for risk. As the project proceeds, that risk allocation, as the certainty increases and your uncertainty goes down. And therefore, the optimism that you might have had at the start of the project, that everything was to be okay, what you're then doing is proving that things are okay or not okay, and therefore that allows you to refine that figure, ideally down, so that ultimately by the time you reach the construction start, you're in the low single figure percentages in terms of that risk allocation.
Okay. Councillor Duff, you happy with that?
Yeah, that was a nice simple explanation. I think I can understand that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. A question, Councillor MacDonald, or a comment?
Question, please.
Yeah, question, on you go then.
Thanks, Provost. The 3,500 views on YouTube on the Arcadis, the consultants page. I think for a lot of us as councillors, when we saw the fly through, it really brought home what the project was all about, the scope, the scale, and as Councillor Devine pointed out, the planting and everything standing out. Is this something that we should be looking to actually promote from an Angus Council side of the fence, or is that too early for us to be doing that, so that we can actually share it more widely with the public? Or is this more something that is still in that early phase and isn't quite ready yet?
Mr. Scott or Mr. Cochrane?
Thanks, Provost. I'll pick that one up. We have shared the fly through through the media channels from Angus Council, and therefore we have been promoting it. I think, as indicated by Councillor MacDonald, there will be opportunities for further sharing of that. The fly through is not there will be more detail that is added, and as we develop particularly the landscaping areas, the road layout is pretty much fixed, but the look of the areas, the landscape in the areas will be developed. And as we develop those, we wanted to update the fly through, and the opportunity might then be for us to take sections of the fly through out and have that as specific means of engagement and communication with the public and with the community. So it is something that we have promoted, and we will continue to promote, and we'll get a huge amount more work out of the particular model as we refine it and as we add detail.
Okay, Councillor MacDonald. Right. Councillor Bell, is it a question?
Yes, it is. Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I mean, I thought the fly through was really amazing, actually, and it helped to bring it to life. I guess my worries are around the financial contingencies and how much wiggle room there is given rising construction costs and the horrific rise in energy costs that I'm haven't even finished yet. And at what point are we at a point of no return in terms of this development? Because I would hate to see people disappointed, but then that might lead to some major financial decisions that are really difficult for this council. as it progresses. So I'm concerned about that. So that's probably pessimism bias, which is not my default setting, just to put that in there.
Okay, Mr. Scott.
Through you, Provost, if I can. Yeah, I think Councillor Bell highlights a very, very pertinent issue in terms of inflation, specifically in terms of construction, where we're talking about fuel, energy, bitumen, aggregates and material of that ilk. It is likely, we're already seeing cost increases. The emphasis, as I said earlier on, is that working with the contractor, we'll be able to manage that in a different way than we would if it was traditional, where we would design it and then seek a price. So we will be able to modify and adapt over that period. And ultimately, as is indicated within the last of the recommendations, there will be an opportunity down the line for a decision to be made on the actual construction award of the contract. And at that stage, in terms of if there is pessimism and if there is a challenge to the available budget, then it will be presented at that time, and therefore the council will have the opportunity to take a view on it before we actually award the construction contract.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mr. Scott. Happy with that, Councillor Bell. Okay, Councillor Cheap, question?
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, it is a question. Actually, Mr. Scott, I think you've just actually probably answered a chunk of what I was going to ask. So, Julie, can I asked most of it, but it follows on from that. So, just by implication, Walter, if with inflation and whatever else is out there takes the projected cost, I think on page 120 from 13.246 million, it goes upward from that. Would that mean that the additional excess would fall on the council, or would there be any extra additional funding from Sustrans? Would that be shared, or how would it be? I know we'd have to come back to council, but I do worry again that at the moment we're committing to £3 million here for our contribution to it all. You know, at what level could that go northward, and how would that be the overall cost addition be split?
Mr. Scott.
Thanks, Provost, and thanks for the question, Councillor Cheap. Initially, I'll answer the easiest bit first in that regard. If there are cost increases or any changes to the cost, then they would be shared between Sustrans and the council as the main funders. As is intimated within the report, we will be seeking to maximise the funding coming through from Sustrans, so where we can offset that against other projects that we're undertaking, we're still pursuing those. So that might mean that the overall percentage of contribution from Sustrans for the project would be increased. In respect of the budget as outlined, there are two elements in terms of that the actual estimated construction costs are inflated effectively by the optimism bias. Mm-hmm. So the 44% optimism bias, which is already within those prices, does give a degree of comfort in terms of additional costs that we might have. If they weren't to come to fruition, then we might be looking at somewhere around 40% less in terms of that level of detail for the design. We couldn't commit to that, and ultimately, under the current circumstances, it may well be that some of that 44% risk and optimism bias is going to be taken up with significant inflationary rises. Our intention in that regard is to seek to manage within that envelope and ultimately keep the cost down to what has been approved and what has been deemed to be affordable. If we can make savings on that, we'll clearly be wanting to do that. But as you've intimated, Councillor Cheap, it will be for the decision for would be down the line in terms of the award of a contract.
Okay. Councillor Cheap, thank you.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for that.
Okay, Councillor Moore, is that a question?
I have a question and a comment.
Question. And I think Councillor Durno has been sitting very patiently, so she can come up with your comment and you can come back. Okay. Councillor Moore, your question.
Mr. Scott, in 5.4, it's referring to the discussions, the feasibility stage, pre-construction, etc. Now, I know that a further report is going to come back to communities, but that will only come back to 16 of the 28 members. is there any way that there could be a regular news update that is circulated to all members of council so everybody is aware of what's happening?
Mr. Scott.
Of course, that's something that we can accommodate. It is something that we've done certainly over the last several months and year or so, is to provide all elected members, not solely those that are on the Communities Committee, with an update on what is a major project. And therefore, yes, we'll be happy to continue to commit to preparing those updates for members so that all members are up to speed on the project ahead of any decision making that may well be undertaken by the Communities Committee. But ultimately, of course, that may be referred to the to Angus Council, given that this report has been brought to the full council.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks very much, Mr. Cochrane. Right, comments? Councillor Dunwell, you've been sitting there very patient. You lead on.
Right, thanks, Provost. Just a few things that have been said. I've been listening on a lot of the comments, the sort of comments that I was going to ask as well, questions, but have been asked. Just for people watching this, this is Scottish Government money that is being used. It was money that was won in a competition, but Sustrans is a United Kingdom-based walking, cycling charity. Just to put that out there, it's not. It may be an alio of the Scottish Government, but the Scottish Government. My inbox and inquiries through community groups, I am still getting a lot of abuse about this project. People, the majority of people in Arbroath do not want the project. They do not want to be cycling. This is not my personal views. I mean, I do go on my cycle, but this is what I am getting as a councillor. So I just thought that should be noted. I have concerns about the 70-30 split, because any councillors coming into the new council might be left with budget proposals they might not be able to fulfil. And I also have worries because other Sustran projects that have been asked for, as in the Freecombe cycle path and the Marywell cycle path in my constituency, won't get any funding because all the Sustran money is going on this project. So I do have real concerns about this. I'm not happy about it, and I'll just have to go with the flow because I'm not in the what would I say, the gang, the cycle gang at the moment. But as I say, I'm not happy about the prospect, and we'll just have to go with the flow. Thank you. Okay,
thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Dunno. You've got a comment, Councillor Moore?
Yes, thank you, Provost. By the way, Councillor Durno, Freecome's in my patch. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. That's what they say. This is the first scheme of its type in Scotland. If we can get this right, we will not only bring investment into Angus, we're going to showcase this scheme, and we're going to show other authorities how it can be done. That is also going to enhance the reputation of this council, and I think that we have to say at this stage, let's move forward, let's see what we can do, let's make the other authorities envious of us.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Moore, for your comments. Councillor MacDonald, your comment?
I'll be very brief. There is a way for all councillors to keep on top of things, Councillor Moore, and that's to read the papers. But Councillor Fairweather absolutely got it spot on with his opening remarks. I wholeheartedly agree. It's a very exciting project. And I was thinking about this, you know, you think about your papers and you're going through and what you're going to say. And I was like, this is actually something that Angus could be proud of. You're going to get off the train, you're going to see this new development. It's going to look absolutely incredible. It is going to be transformative for our growth in a good way, and it's something that I wholeheartedly back. So I think it's absolutely something from a personal point of view that we need to see. I like the ambition, and hopefully this can then set the ball rolling for other ambitious projects going forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald, absolutely right. Councillor Praise, comment?
Yes, thanks, Provost. I'm a cyclist myself. quite recently readopted the hobby when I was able to acquire an electrically assisted bike. I call it my granny bike, and I'm quite unashamed about that. Anyway, I've always been quite sceptical about this project, and I'm certainly not ashamed of that, because actually, as a non-administration councillor, I think it's part of my job to be sceptical about pretty much everything. My concerns originally were twofold. One, I was really concerned with the original proposals regarding the layout. That's been changed, and I'm quite comfortable with the layout now. My other, probably the main concern I had, was that this project, while I'm sure it will be delivered and it will be absolutely wonderful when it is, before it really comes to fruition, a whole lot more has to be done to connect it up to the town. That's the whole essence of this. We're not building this just so that people can come and promenade up and down or go up and down on their bike on a Sunday afternoon. It has to be more than that. We're spending millions on it. And it has to be about connecting up the town so that people can actively travel across Arbroath and go about their business, not just their leisure, but get to their work, etc., get to public transport to take them elsewhere. And so there's a long way to go with this project. And I think that's where the real excitement comes, because it does have the potential to completely regenerate and change Arbroath for the better. My big scepticism was that we would be spending all the money in Arbroath for the next 20 to 30 years, and there wouldn't be anything much left for any of the other boroughs in Angus. But we've had assurances. There seems to be money in the pipeline that's going to allow other boroughs to get a start to doing something as well. Because, you know, we might like to think that we're one Angus, but we're actually a series of boroughs who all have their own ideas and their own aspirations, and we have to make sure that they're getting a little bit of encouragement here and get some money spent across all the boroughs as soon as possible. So apart from that, yeah, I'm getting more and more excited about this. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brace. Okay, Councillor Speed, is this a comment? You've had a question.
Yeah, it was a comment, but I noticed Councillor, so you may have a question.
Yeah. Well, we've only a question. It'll be a comment. You said he's short. Carry on. We're on comments. Go on, Councillor Speed.
Yeah, no, it was. Thank you for allowing me to ask my questions. It's always difficult when you can only ask so much, and so just thank you to my other councillor colleagues who have asked questions and raised concerns, especially around inflation costs and what impact that may have. And again, I think I just want to highlight that absolutely this is about building in cycle infrastructure, but I think most importantly, again, creating a space for all, particularly that pedestrian aspect that I think has been lost at times throughout this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Speed. Councillor Whiteside, your comment, please.
Thanks, Provost, and I'll keep this quite brief because a lot's already been said. I think this is pretty much aspirational. I'm really looking forward to seeing it taking shape. Just like as in members of the public, there are varied views around this table, but sometimes it's really difficult to envisage change, and people are scared about change sometimes. I think the fly-through's been really instructive, and I think this forward-thinking project is actually going to lead and encourage regeneration across Arbroath, and I think once people see the shape that it takes, they'll be really pleased with it. So looking forward greatly to seeing it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whiteside. Councillor Speed, could you take your hand in, please? Councillor Hans, comment?
Thanks, Provost. It's actually been the question. I should have got my question in.
We're finished with questions.
It kind of combines, and I hope you would give me the chance to do so. It's just the term spaces for everyone, and this is what I really want to comment on. I think, you know, as a councillor who's never been able to see the fly view and everything that everybody else is talking about, also, obviously, I can't see the diagrams in the papers as well. And in principle, I support this programme and project, and I think it is aspirational, etc. However, I'm just sitting here thinking about experience during lockdown and the number of times I nearly got bashed by cycles, and I have previously been knocked down, would you believe, by bikes as well. I noted in the paper that the RNIB parliamentary officer or something had been consulted with the project. But you know what, we need to get down to the nuts and bolts here in terms of making sure that the guide dogs for the blind and forfar, which should be easy enough for people to speak to, they're the ones that actually deal with the practical mobility issues of blind people. And also you've got local authority rehab officers as well that also do long cane training, because right now my concern here is that this is not really going to be spaces for everyone, because I'm really, really concerned about blind and visually impaired people missing out here. So I would make a huge plea. You know, we talk about accessible Angus, and I do believe genuinely around that, you know, this virtual room, we have got a lot of support for accessible Angus, but please, 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 can we make sure that it is inclusive for everybody? And although cycling is a great activity, if you can't hear them coming and you can't see them, you can't dodge them. So we need to make sure that we take that on board as well.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hans, and I agree with you, particularly, you know, I mean, I've almost been hedgehogged a couple of times in Perth because I haven't heard cyclists coming along the pavement, and I know exactly where you're coming from. Mr. Scott, do you want to just comment on anything that Councillor Hans has just said?
Yes, thank you, Provost. I appreciate the opportunity to respond to Councillor Hans. I'll declare there was a certain reticence to utilise the visual fly-through as the be-all and end-all for this project, because we have had inclusivity and accessibility and fairness right at the heart of the project from day one. We did introduce the physical models for that very purpose, which were available at the public events that were held, because we'd identified that was the most accessible way for the vast majority of people to understand and appreciate the layout. So whilst the visualization is fantastic for those who are able to appreciate it, it doesn't necessarily get the full message across. I'll re-emphasize in that regard that it isn't just a cycling project. It is about pedestrians, it is about other road users. And one of the things that we have to recognise, and we do recognise within our broader approach to road safety and active travel, is the requirement for all road users to behave appropriately. And that behavioural side of things on the use of the paths where there's an interaction between pedestrians and cyclists is going to be absolutely critical. But by providing the best possible infrastructure to allow for that good behaviour, what we'd be hopeful for is to see a transfer of that into much more of that cyclist, pedestrian, road user behaviour down the line. So I'd be hopeful in that regard that we see better behaviour. And in respect of the consultation and engagement, we have liaised with local disability forums. We will continue to do so. In that respect, it's not something that I'm of a view that we can do too much of, because good design for accessibility and for disabled people is just frankly good design. So we will continue to do that, and having had Councillor Speed and other councillors so involved in this project in the last few years has effectively ensured that those kind of considerations are brought to the fore with this project.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Mr. Scott. Are you happy with that, Councillor Hans?
More or less. I still do want an undertaking that you do involve the experts with mobility skills as well, because disability organisations, depending on their makeup, they may not have first-hand or lived experience about the difficulties with, and I will extend it, Provost, because you're quite right as well, people with a sensory impairment and how people navigate their environments with a sensory impairment. It's really, really important that the professionals or people with lived experience are involved, not just umbrella groups.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much for that, Councillor Hannah. I'm sure Mr. Scott will get these things implemented. Okay, Councillor Cheap, your question, your comment.
No, it's a comment, thank you, Provost. It's just actually to put out the hand of support to Councillor Brays, actually, because Kenny, you weren't alone in being doubting this project from the outset, as I have been as well. But I thought actually this was a really good paper brought forward here, and very detailed in each section of the route. And it's only when you go back, you have time to sit back and look at all of this and read about it and think, do you know what? Why is there a dual carriageway going through the middle of Arbroath when on the A92 there's coming into it there's not a dual carriageway? And I just think that this is exciting. I think I am very concerned about the cost. I think that's come forward all the way through my approach to this. But I think Mr. Scott has addressed that today. And I think if we can keep it to budget as much as practically possible, or adapt it so it stays at budget, then I will support this. I think it's the right way forward now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cheap. And like you, I remember Arbroath when it didn't have a dual carriageway, and I agree with your comment entirely.
I don't remember it that well, Provost.
Councillor Fairweather.
Thank you. Right spoken. Perhaps Councillor Speed maybe wants to come in with a comment, and if I could perhaps finish off.
Well, I was just going to say Councillor Speed had a comment and she's had a question.
Okay, do you want me just to go on?
I would, if you would just sum up, Councillor Fairweather.
Right.
Yeah. Hang on, there's Councillor King with a hand up. Your comment. Go on, Councillor King.
Thank you, Provost. Listened very carefully to all the non-Arbroath members praising something that's going to be happening in Arbroath. I've never had any confidence in this particular proposal. I've always believed in the adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the Arbroath dual carriageway is not broken, despite what Councillor Fairweather and Councillor Speed say. It's an established route. There are no difficulties in crossing it if you stick to the crossings. I feel it will become much more congested when it's reduced to a single carriageway. I feel that there will be a lot more hold-ups at the various crossings. It can't be anything else if it's a managed traffic situation on a two-way track road. I would have brought an amendment to turn this down, but I realise that the support across the council is not matched to the comments that I am getting, and I'm not going out on social media or going around asking people. People are coming to me and saying, what's this about the dual carriageway? We don't agree with it. Can you not stop it? And I have to say, well, no, it would need 16 members, 15 members to support me, or another 14 members to make up 15 to support me to do that. And there's more than that in the administration who are going to support it. So there's nothing I can do to stop it. But however, I am not going to bring an amendment, although I could probably get a seconder in Councillor Dunno. What I am going to do is I am going to ask that my dissent be recorded from what will look like a unanimous decision.
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor King. Councillor Fairweather, if you just want to sum up.
Thank you, Provost. I'm not going to get into any debates about who is to happen, and who doesn't. At the end of the day, I was invited through to Perth. I think it was 2018-19. And I was absolutely enthralled by the fact that money was going to be coming from Sustrans to six projects. This normally goes to the cities, and I thought I was just there to applaud Glasgow, Edinburgh, Perth, and Perth, getting that money. And when Arbroath won £9 million, thanks to our officers and what they had put forward, I was absolutely over the moon. I've not been over the moon with some of the comments that I've gone on since, but this is a project. It's not about it's not broken, so let's not fix it. It's about a vision, and it's about a vision, what Arbroath can do, and it's not just about a vision. It's about a regeneration, and it's going to be a regeneration of Arbroath. But it's also the start of a regeneration, of all of Angus, of what can happen through Sustrans. I'd like to thank all our officers. I'd like to thank Sustrans, and I would also like to thank Murray Scott of Arcadis Consulting. Today is monumental for me. Let's move this forward. And I look forward in my retirement to seeing something that is, which will be absolutely huge, monumental, for Arbroath, but taking Angus with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fairweather. I think we're now at the stage. Do we agree the recommendations set out in paragraph 1?
No.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Registered to
No, can you note my thank you. I'm with Alec King, thank you.
Okay, that's fine, Councillor Durno. So Councillor Durno and Councillor King are registered in dissent, and I take it the remaining colleagues agree the motions set out, the recommendations set out in paragraph 1.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Now move on to item 8, which is the Treasury Management Strategy Statement 2023. The papers are there before you. Any questions or comments? We will address them to Mr. Lorimer. Councillor Devine, you've got a question.
Just one short question. I'm hoping that the Link Group has looked at any investments we might have in Russian organisations, companies, etc., and that they have already disinvested.
Yeah, I can answer that question because I asked the finance director this morning, and I was assured that there are none.
That's great.
Good. In any way.
Thank you.
I can assure you that because I asked Mr. Cochrane this morning. Councillor Whiteside, your question?
Yeah, I've got a question on page 106 of the paper. It's in terms of the fiscal flexibilities, and we're told that there is currently no basis for the use of these flexibilities. Now, I believe that actually the administration budget included the use of those. So I just want to ask about that. I mean, clearly, if that's the case, it was totally against the recommendations of our officers, and I just want everybody who agreed to that budget to be aware, if they're not already been made aware of that. I don't think the people of Angus deserve an administration which makes irresponsible choices, such as that.
Hang on, before we say any more, Councillor Whiteside, could we ask Mr. Lorimer maybe just to answer your question?
What page?
Mr. Lorimer?
Thank you, Provost. I think it's page 206.
206, sorry.
Section 7 of the report. Yes. So I think there's maybe just a little bit of confusion about what's meant by fiscal flexibilities in this context. So going back probably about a year and a half or so ago, early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, there were significant additional costs being incurred, and there wasn't enough funding at that time to be able to necessarily cover all of those. So one of the solutions that was put forward at that time through discussion between Scottish Government and COSLA was what were termed fiscal flexibilities. Now, there were three components to that. One was around taking a holiday in relation to loans fund repayments. One was in relation to flexibility around the use of capital receipts to meet revenue costs. And the third one was around what was called service concessions, which are really around PPP, PFI payments. Now, the two in relation to loans fund and capital receipts, those are still available to be, those flexibilities have been extended and are still available to be used. However, they need to be used for COVID response type purposes. And what we're saying in paragraph 7.1 is that the position is that we still have COVID funding that has meant that we wouldn't be able to use those flexibilities for COVID purposes. There is a downside to using those flexibilities. It does mean that it would affect your funding and your finances in other ways. It effectively pushes costs further down the line. As things have developed in relation to the funding for the COVID pandemic, more funding came in essentially, which meant that those fiscal flexibilities in the case for using them was not as great, not as urgent. So that's really what that paragraph 7.1 refers to. The service concession flexibility is one that is still under discussion, and I'm hopeful that may provide some flexibility, possibly not in relation to COVID response though, but for it to allow us to deal with other pressures. But we need to see how that one will develop as part of the discussions between COSLA and government over the next few months. I hope that right-sides question just in terms of how those came about and why we haven't used them as part of the budget.
Okay, Councillor Whiteside, thank you. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. I just wanted to ask Mr. Lorimer about the IFRS 16. I think we did raise that maybe a while ago at Scrutiny and Audit, and from my understanding, the implementation was delayed due to COVID. I guess what do councillors need to know about it? And I suspect that's going to be a matter for post the election. But I'm just conscious. It's been mentioned a few times, but perhaps whether at some point maybe the future council leads a briefing on that, so at least we understand what issues there will be for us, if any. That's a question, I suppose.
Okay, a question. Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. Mr. Lorimer, would you be able to answer that?
Yeah, thank you, Provost. Yes, yeah, it's a significant one. I think as Councillor Duff flags, we've had some discussion of that previously at Scrutiny and Audit Committee. It is something I think we've previously committed to bringing reports forward on. One of the things we'll need to do after the local government elections is, in terms of training and induction, is around treasury management and a whole range of other things. And the IFRS 16 leasing position will be part of that. There are some discussions going on at a national level and a consultation at the moment about whether a further deferral of that standard being applied should come into place, but the decision on that is still to be made. So it's one that we are planning to implement for the 1st of April 2022, but the timescales may again change, but we will keep elected members up to date with how that progresses. It is a significant development for us in terms of our accounting and our treasury management.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lorimer. Happy with that, Councillor Duff?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McMillan Douglas, you have a question?
No, I've got a comment.
Hang on, are there any other questions? Councillor Salmond, is that a question?
Well, I'm not sure really what it is. It's after Mr. Lorimer's answer to the false allegation that Councillor Whiteside's made. I'm looking for her to withdraw it and apologise to the administration, because I think it's totally inappropriate to be making these allegations after the budget went through last week, which was signed off by the Director of Finance as competent. So I'm sure as a responsible leader of a political party, Councillor Whiteside would like to withdraw that and now apologise.
Councillor Whiteside?
If I've interpreted that bit wrong, I do apologise for that. I don't withdraw the view that the budget was irresponsible. Thanks.
Well, that's your opinion. Okay, we've got an apology. But,
thank you very much, Councillor Whiteside.
Say again, Councillor Salmon.
I was just thanking Councillor Whiteside for her apology.
Thank you very much. We now go on to Councillor Macmillan Douglas.
Me to make a comment?
Yes, absolutely. We're on to comments now.
Thank you, Provost. I just wanted to refer back to the comments on the use of flexibilities, because I was actually a finance convener when those discussions started, and I think may have finished actually. And Mr. Lorimer, and he will correct me if I've got this wrong, Mr. Lorimer and I decided at that time that we wouldn't use the flexibilities that the Scottish Government were allowing, particularly those that were going to push costs into the future, because it has been an absolute fundamental of this administration for 5 years, 4 years with me as finance convener, and absolutely carried on by Councillor Salmond, that we would always put prudence first. We have, and that's why the finances, although obviously stretched by constant underfunding by government, have been well managed throughout.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Macmillan Douglas. Councillor Duff, do you have a comment? An old hand.
It's an old hand.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, are there any other comments, colleagues? Okay, do we agree the recommendation set out in paragraph 1? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Right, we'll now go on to item 9, the review of loans fund policy. I'm going to ask Mr. Lorimer if he could just give us a quick lead in on that one.
Thank you, Provost. Two for the price of one on the kind of treasury aspects today. I appreciate, members, that this is one of the more technical reports, which I occasionally need to bring to full council. It's here today because I'm proposing a change to existing policy for how we repay our loans fund debt, and it's one of those things that can only be agreed by full council in line with the legislation. So that's why it's here and not at one of the committees. Members might recall that in our change programme for financial year 2021, so two budget cycles ago now, we targeted a saving of £2 million from undertaking what was called a loans fund. Now that review was made possible because of a change in legislation, as we've explained in the report. Now what we did was we delayed the implementation of that review when we set the 21-22 budget, because at that time we were still investigating the possible use of those fiscal flexibilities that we were just discussing in the previous item. And the reason we delayed the implementation of the loans fund review at that time is because if we'd decided to use those fiscal flexibilities, it could have had a material effect on what we were looking to do in terms of the loans fund review. So that's why we're coming back to this now and today. As I say, the position on fiscal has now been clarified. So we're in a position to bring forward this loans fund review. But there's a lot in the report that the paragraph 519 really summarises what the report is seeking approval for, and that is to amend our existing policy for the repayment of loans fund advances to a standard repayment period of 40 years, to use an annuity interest rate of 5% in calculating the repayment profile. And we're also proposing to apply that retrospectively, and that generates a saving, and we're proposing to apply that saving on a smooth basis of £2 million per annum, in line with the previous target for the general fund, but also using revenue account. So that approach would enable us to deliver the previously targeted savings for the long term. And the revised report does, in my view, one of the key things really in terms of the 2016 regulations. We have to adopt a prudent approach to the repayment of our loans fund advances. So the recommendations in this report, I believe, do that. Most other councils have also undertaken similar reviews, supported by the same Treasury Advisors Link group that we use. And although the policy approach in our report is very much unique to Angus, the principles upon which it's based are common to what's being done elsewhere. So I thought it was worthwhile just giving a little bit more introduction to that report, Provost, because it's a little bit unusual and, as I say, quite a technical report for Council, but it has to come to Council in line with the legislation. Happy to answer any questions members might have on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lorimer, for that very full, detailed explanation. Are we any questions on this report? No questions. Are there any comments? No comments. Colleagues, are the recommendations set out in paragraph 1 agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Very much. We'll now move on to item number 10, which is council meetings interim, we use the word interim, and interim arrangements and future plans. And I'm going to ask the Chief Executive just to give an overview of this. Mrs. Williamson.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I wanted to take this report myself, and hopefully the reason for that will become clear in my preamble. This report focuses on the 2 council meetings immediately after the May election and before the summer recess. Given the anticipated change in restrictions regarding social distancing, and with a view to supporting newly elected members of the council, this report asks members to revisit the decision they took on the 16th of December. This decision was that council meetings, including the 2 proposed for the new council, remain online. With the Scottish Government's announcement on the 25th of February advising it was likely that all COVID legal restrictions would be lifted on the 21st of March, I think it would be supportive and helpful to new members to meet in person, to work alongside fellow councillors and experience the traditional seat of Angus local government, our chamber in Forfar. It'd be my intention to bring a further report in June, as set out in recommendation 5, not 4, I think is the Roman numerals in some of you. Bring a further report in June with options for how the new council could possibly proceed. It'd be for members of the new council to decide on investment in any infrastructure required to support how and where these meetings would then take place. Today's report asks members to utilise the savings from elected members' travel budget to contract a quality sound and vision company to facilitate the online delivery of these 2 meetings. As members are aware, our ageing technology in the chamber cannot facilitate the online delivery and quality of sound required and expected now from our citizens. Finally, I must add a further caveat to what is proposed in the report. Given the increase in numbers of COVID infections, should advisory guidance outline that social distancing must remain and we have to remain online. Provost, I'd like members to agree the report, but also to accept the change to recommendation 3. And essentially that really is, should Scottish Government advise public sector the physical distance to remain in place? So recommendation 3 really is to consider that if that's impossible, and if national guidance or health and safety states, the meeting will continue to be held remotely. So in summing up, the report really is about 2 meetings, 2 meetings of council, the use of quality facilities to support new members just in to council, and doing that in a way that is most appropriate to them. I'm hoping that makes things clear about the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Williamson. Questions? Councillor MacDonald, your question.
Thank you, Provost. Last meeting that we discussed this, I specifically mentioned I didn't feel that the chamber was fit for purpose. I don't think it's fit for purpose as an ongoing chamber for the amount of councillors we've got now as it is, even without COVID or anything else. I just want to know if any consideration was given to finding a venue within the council estate that could hold members and officers for the first full meeting in a more comfortable way than we currently face. Because at the minute, I sit like Christmas dinner table with a table leg between my feet. And then we've obviously, for people that are watching this video, the officers then all surround us on one side, and then the public are stuck in the corner. And it's all just a little bit, just, as I say, not fit for purpose. So my question really is, have we considered whether or not we can use another venue? And obviously, if we're then going to pay money to broadcast that, it would be a very different proposition if it was maybe based in a community hall rather than the small chamber, say.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. I know that the Chief Executive and our team have actually been looking at that, but I'll let the Chief Executive answer your question.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor MacDonald. All valid points. Yes, looking at other buildings is definitely under consideration. Given the uncertainty, and I mean, there is a bit of not having a crystal ball here around how things are going to go with the infection. Given the uncertainty and also, the variables about setting up a meeting in an unknown area, new councillors with new kit, and how many officers will need to be there to support it, I guess I'm saying for these two meetings, we should consider using the chamber. Now, we can consider other places. Certainly the paper I would want to be bringing in June would be offering options around that for members of the new council. But for now, in terms of the chamber, we're looking at least the chairs with chairs we already have, but smaller chairs to create a wee bit more space for the two meetings to take place in the facilities that existing members know well and new members will get an induction into. Clearly, the paper that in June that's going to come will set out options around in-house meetings, potentially the use of other spaces, but that would all have to be costed and brought council for a decision. So hope that helps as a focus on these two meetings in particular, just council, to enhance the experience of new members.
Can I have a wee comeback, please? As most of the chamber might be aware, I've just recovered from COVID, and it was, for me, it was pretty bad. Not hospital or anything, but I'm still feeling the effects of it. And my greatest fear would be that take a meeting like this in this manner, just because the government says we can, doesn't mean to say that we should. And that would be my worry, that, especially looking at, no disrespect to anybody else in this virtual chamber, and some of you I know are trying to come back, but the age profile, that sort of factors could be an issue. So that would just be my concerns of that. But thank you, Chief Executive, and thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Cheap. You're muted, Councillor Cheap.
Sorry about that. And thanks, Provost. And I know people are aware of my thoughts that I put in writing to everybody in the last week or so on this. But and thank you, Mrs. Williamson. You did come back to me explaining why this was coming forward. There's a couple of things here from a question point of view. I do support what Councillor MacDonald's just said, because I think that's key to all of this. We are crushed into the town chamber. We've put up with it for years, and there's some comfort there when we're actually having various other meetings, our development communities, whatever. There's more room. It just seems a bit odd to actually pull everybody into a room where you're going to have, I say, 28 councillors around a table, plus heaven knows how many council officers around the perimeter, and possibly members of the public who feel inclined to come in, and then not do it for committees where, again, new councillors have to experience the various types of committees, and they are all different. So why wouldn't we have them in the room? It'd be far safer for so much smaller numbers to be in the county chambers. That's really my question on it. That, I do have a comment to come back. I'm picking up what Margaret has just said about looking forward to the future and options, and I think that was what my email to everybody was to look forward in the first place, and also look at options rather than just taking what is the status quo. So, but if you don't mind, Provost, sorry, if we could just maybe address the question as to if we're going to do it for a couple of full council meetings, why don't we do it for the other committee meetings in that during that period as well?
Okay, Councillor Cheap. Okay, I'll to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, again, all valid points. I guess we've got to start somewhere. And I guess the reason I'm adding the caveat to recommendation 3 is around the points that Councillor MacDonald made and also Councillor Cheap. There'll be caution, and we may end up with all the legislative conditions being removed, but guidance coming in via 1 metre distancing. And we can't use the chamber, clearly. So the decision that was made by Council was that we would move online for all the meetings up until the recess. I think it was until the end of June. So that decision stands. I guess as returning officer and chief executive of the council, I feel, how do we bring people on and move forward? And I'm also looking at the costs associated with this. I know the costs of bringing in a contractor for good sound and vision, cost to do that for committee meetings as well as council meetings. So I picked these 2 council meetings because one is a statutory meeting, which is a significant meeting for all councillors, and the second one where it's the first ordinary type council meeting before recess, in order to give a good opportunity for members getting started, and some contact points for them to be together. As I say, the June report would set some of the things out that members are asking about, and it will come with consequences. And it's a big decision, and I think the members who are present here will be well aware of the limitations of the chamber, but it will require decisions about spend and how we move forward. So Councillor Cheap's point's a very good one. It's an incredibly relevant one. And why are we doing it for these 2 council meetings? Bottom line for me is I'm proposing this because I think it would set us off on a good foot to get forward as a new council early on, particularly if we have a larger shift in the councillors who are present then.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mrs. Williamson. Okay, Councillor Cheap. I'm now going to move on to Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, Provost. I also have concerns about this proposal. I understand the importance of the statutory meeting and the fact that we have to move sometime. It just seems illogical with one of the busiest meetings. I know the equality impact assessment looks at specifically only over 70s, but actually long COVID affects any age. And Mark pointed out that he's recovering from COVID. I've got another team member that currently has COVID and isn't feeling very well. We don't know how long COVID's going to affect everybody at this point. We mentioned possible other venues several months ago, and I just wonder why none of them have been taken forward. Because I do see the benefits of having the statutory meeting in person. I just think the chamber, which was actually designed around a town council many years ago, is just not fit for this particular purpose any longer. So I just add my concerns to the others that have been raised and wonder if there's any other solution in this case.
Okay,
I think one more point is, if the restrictions may be gone, but the virus hasn't gone, and I think the councillors and officers, regardless
regardless of what the restrictions allow us to do.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Whiteside. Ms Williamson, do you want to reply to Councillor Whiteside's point about, is there another location, another venue?
Yeah, and we have looked at other locations, and from what I can gather about the contractor for sound and vision, that wouldn't be too problematic to use another area. There could be other challenges around what these what the areas are, including if they're multi-purpose use. Happy to look at that again. I think that presents challenges for us as well, though. So I'll come back to, we already have a decision to remain online, and if members were wanting to remain online, then we can remain on. But the reasoning for this, as outlined, was to give opportunities for bringing people together for the new council.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs Williamson. Next one is Councillor Bell. Question?
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, coming at it from a public health perspective, I have real concern meeting in this way, but I understand the intent behind it. Even though restrictions might be lifted, there's still, I guess, an element of having public personal responsibility for doing all we can to prevent infections. And infections are on the rise again at the moment, and our hospitals are in the worst position they've been for months. I wondered if a compromise position might be that we have an almost social event a day or two before the statutory meeting to get everyone together in a venue where space allows it, and that the meeting's held online. And I think from a personal and a public health point of view, be much more supportive of that approach. I think that would be a workable compromise. And I have to say, I'm not emotionally or traditionally bound to the chamber as an entity. This isn't about a physical space. It's about the work that we do in decision making and what we bring to the table, and we can do that on a Teams call that completely removes the risk of any cross infection. And that for me is the duty of care, that approach that I think we need to come from on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bell. Ms Williamson, do you want to reply to the question of for the statutory meeting?
There's nothing to prohibit us from doing that, Provost or Councillor Bell. We could do that and remain online and make the decision today that the virtual meeting continues for May and for June.
Okay, thank you. Ms Williamson, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Provost. I'm not sure whether we're in questions or comments.
We're in questions, up to question that Councillor Bell asked.
Mrs Williamson, when we discussed this in December, I suggested, as we had hybrid working and we were proposing to continue it, that an area of Angus House would be feasible, because there is a large building there. It is the headquarters of the council. You want the experience for new councillors. Well, if we go in the chamber, yes, they'll have the experience of playing sardines. But I would have thought that the Angus House would have been looked at, that there would have been space available, and given the modern building that it is, that any necessary cameras or whatever would be able to be fitted in. So I'm just wondering why we're saying, well, we can look at it again. We could have looked at it 3 months ago.
Well, I'm advised, Councillor Moore, and I'm sure the Chief Executive will prove me right or wrong, that in the big room where you can open back all the screens with the current spacing and safety and rules, we get about 20 odd people in it, and that's it. and that's you know that's it. But I'll ask again, Mrs. Williamson. She might prove me wrong on that or whatever.
Can I just clarify, please, Provost, before Mrs. William answers? I'm not talking about places like training room A, B, and C, where you can just open the screens to make a bigger room.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of a wing. We have 6 wings in that building, and half a wing would supply enough space, I would have thought, to be able to have the council sitting around with officers and there to be space.
Ms. Williamson?
Yeah, through you, Provost. You're absolutely right about the big rooms that we've got, and them not being big enough as required, and probably the same sort of issue as the chamber. In terms of the wings, there's a lot of fixed features already there at the moment, and this was really for the 2 meetings and balancing up the costs required to do 2 meetings in this way against the long-term solution that we'll need to find.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williamson. Councillor Praise.
Yes, thank you, Provost. It is a comment.
Right, well, we're just doing questions at the moment. See there
Okay, I'll wait.
Any more questions? Councillor Speed, is it a question?
It's more a comment, Provost.
No, hang on, let's just go through to everybody else who's got questions. Councillor Hands, is that a question?
It is, Provost.
Okay, go on, Councillor Hands.
Sorry, yeah, thank you. Just to ask the Chief Executive, we're kind of skirting round the potential of hybrid, or at least I thought we were going to start on that, and then we've kind of skirted away from it again. But it's just to point out that a few months ago, we did a dismissal appeal, and 3 councillors were online, and officers and the appellant were at Angus House. So that actually worked quite well, which kind of then suggests who would actually need to be in place in situ for the initial meeting. And I would guess certain officers plus the leader of the council and the leader of the opposition for certain, in case there was parity of votes and cutting cards. But then there's the option of the rest of councillors being online. And what I'm actually thinking as well, we're saying, that the initial meeting, which is taking place in the middle of May. But before that, if we're going to follow suit the way we did in 2017, there was a 2-week induction period. So there's already going to be, I'm assuming, and maybe you can clarify that there'll be a period of induction anyway, where councillors are able to start networking with other councillors. And maybe that's where we need to focus on the potential for face-to-face meetings, because potentially, some of it could be done at a ward basis when we're looking at issues in the ward. We've done that before. We've also done locality groups, bringing councillors together as well, looking at the issues in a locality. But just generally, I think that there are maybe ways of getting councillors together during the induction process that means that people that can then be prepared for the 2 meetings in May and June. And in terms of the June meeting, I'm not totally convinced that one needs to be accommodated anywhere other than online, because let's face it, we've got 2 years worth of recorded meetings now. It's a brilliant training resource for new councillors. Anybody wanting to watch what happens at the council meetings, at full council meetings, there's plenty of meetings for them to view. The statutory meeting, I totally agree, it's a separate issue, but I don't think it's insurmountable either to go for a hybrid model or to use the induction process in order to prepare councillors for the potential to have even the statutory meeting online.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Councillor Hand. Ms. Williamson, the point that Councillor Hand has made about the induction period, but I know that you feel that, and probably quite rightly, that everybody to be together and just get the the feel of the council. Do you want to comment on Councillor Hand's question?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. And again, yeah, there will be opportunities for induction, largely online, that will take place. To have a hybrid meeting of that size and of that scale is hugely complicated for us as a council. And come back to, we could have a number of new councillors with new IT kit using Teams, and then over and above that, we're trying to conduct a hybrid meeting. There are reputational risks to the council should that not go well as the first meeting, apart from not being a great experience for new members. So therefore, I would not recommend a hybrid meeting for the statutory meeting or the June meeting. I think the decision's really got to be made. Do we want to have an in-person meeting, or do we want to have the meeting in May and June continuing virtually as we're currently doing?
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Hans. Councillor Braze. A question?
Yes, thanks, convener. Well, I mean, I know exactly where Mrs. Williamson's coming from with this, and I totally agree with her that there'd be a huge amount of merit in getting the statutory meeting and perhaps another meeting live. Massive benefit to that. But I just think, of all the places to have it, the chamber is about the last place I would pick. And it would really concern me if we were planning to basically insist that 20 members of Angus Council staff were to go in that room and sit round that table, rubbing shoulders all the way round. I would find that really difficult to accept. And so I really don't like the idea of insisting that a whole lot of new councillors who are not here to make the decision today because they've not yet been elected, we're going to be forced that. Very uncomfortable about it. And we seem to be being presented here with the council chamber is the only choice. If we want to have a live meeting, it has to be in the council chamber because there's nowhere else in Angus. Well, I can think of half a dozen hotels with suitable function suites where people stand up, lay people, run-of-the-mill people stand up and make speeches at weddings and all the rest of it, and they seem to manage fine. I really don't think we've exhausted the alternatives here. And that's my comment. Thanks.
Well, it was a question. So your question is, we should be looking. Could we look for a venue other than the?
Yeah, that's my question.
That's your question. Okay, right. And I think Mrs. Williamson's kind of talked about that in previously. People have said the same thing. I want to ask her to come back because I think it would just be like a record. You're cracking it. Councillor Speed, question.
Sorry, no, it's not a question. I'm just.
Okay, hang on a bit. Comment just hang on. Councillor Durno, is that a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Mrs. Williamson if she'd considered the Webster Theatre in Arbroath, because that's under Angus Alive, and you could have the big screen on, and you could, have the acoustics and everything there. It would be ideal for spacing people out.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Williamson. Angus Alive.
Provost, our chamber is our chamber, okay? I mean, that is our chamber. So this proposal was all around going back to our chamber, where we sit as a local government. And it was putting on the table the offer of bringing folk together in our chamber. And clearly from today, I'm hearing that we don't like the chamber. But this is a temporary measure. And in response to people's concerns about our care for people, I think, as I said earlier, there's legislation and it looks like Scottish Government will lift that later on this month, but they may also put in guidance which would prevent us meeting up until the end of June. Who knows, until the end of August? We don't know that. What I'm proposing here today is an option for us, should that be removed. And in order to give members a good experience of starting out in the council, we could meet in person. So that's what it's there for, but it certainly would still have the caveat that should public health advise that we should not be doing that, we would not be doing that.
Yeah. Okay. I think answers the question. Okay, Councillor Speed, is this a question?
Sorry, I just maybe have left my hand up. No, I'll wait in comments.
Yeah, that's fine. Councillor Fairweather, you got a question?
No, mine's just a comment.
Okay, right. Any other questions? None. Okay, let's go on then. Councillor Fairweather, comment. And anybody else who wants to comment?
Yeah, right. Thanks, Provost. Right, I've listened to the concerns of of everybody here, and we could go round and round in circles with this one. To be perfectly honest, tend to agree with the recommendations from the Chief Executive. With the change to 3, but listening to what Councillor MacDonald has said and others. There are concerns. Last night, we had a meeting with prospective candidates, and there were 15 of them there. And I'm quite sure, by listening to some of them, that they're looking forward to going into the chambers. I don't know if I did 15 years ago when I became a councillor or not. I don't think I was looking forward to it at all. But we've got to have to find some common ground here. So do we agree today that we'll listen to what the Chief Executive is saying, but if the guidance comes out from the Scottish Government that can't happen, and we have to go virtual for the meetings in May and June, that's what we agree. I'm only looking at a solution here. Let's not go round and round in circles. Do we agree something today with the proviso? If the Scottish Government can come out and the guidance is quite simply it can't happen, we do go virtual for the 2 meetings in May and June. Just a thought. Thank you.
Okay, right. Councillor Moore, your comment?
Yes, thank you, Provost. Personally, I think that the council chamber is not fit for purpose nowadays, not for the number of people who have to go in it. And I think it would make a very suitable ceremonial room for weddings, etc. But I think if you're trying to get people round the table, you're not going to do it with a full council. And I think that we should be looking at somewhere like Angus House, where we can create a space for the council meetings and for other meetings. Whether that happens before these 2 meetings or whether it takes longer, I don't know. But I would hope that we would look at the alternatives and consider making the council chamber ceremonial.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Councillor Duff, comment?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Yeah, I agree with the Chief Executive that I think these 2 meetings must be held in person. I think having them online I would not support at all under any circumstances. I think I agree with comments that the chamber is no longer fit for purpose. I don't have any particular emotional attachment to it, and I'm quite sure that new councillors won't. My tuppence worth would be there are a lot of large spaces that the council own. I remember going to dinner in, I think, the Brecon Community Campus for the Scottish Rural Parliament. It was a huge space that was used, and something like that would be, I would have thought, perfectly adequate. We've got the Forfar Community Campus, we've got the Saltire Leisure Centre, where we'll do the count. All of those are big spaces, and we could use either of those or any of those to get people far enough apart if that was a concern. On a personal basis, I would be happy to use the chamber, but I detect a lot of reserve amongst many colleagues. So, but I think we need to meet in person. I think that's a must for me.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Duff. Councillor MacDonald, your comment?
Thank you, Provost. it's interesting to hear Margot say it's our chamber. And I suppose for the council it is our chamber, but I don't have that tie to it. I believe the council could meet anywhere, and maybe statutorily that's not something that I would follow particularly. If I'm returned as a councillor, I would not feel comfortable going to the first meeting knowing what I know about that chamber. And so I suppose in the spirit of what Councillor Fairweather said, if the answer to the question here is it's the chamber or online, my answer is it's online. I recognise, though, the benefit of having the meeting in person, and that's why when I first said it, if we could get a bigger venue, that makes sense to me. You know, more spaced out, more room, more comfortable. Everybody else can, you know, we can all fit in properly, proper ventilation, makes a lot of sense. But if the option is purely Angus Council chamber or online meetings, I would fall down the side of the online meetings.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Cheap, your comment.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. Yeah, I think I fully agree that I would like I can understand the sense of having the statutory meeting initially in person. I can understand, having gone through that last time for the first time, how necessary that really is. But I wholeheartedly agree with what it can't be in the chamber, and you know, it doesn't. It's not our chamber. It's our council, and more importantly, it's the people of Angus's council. And this is why I've been saying we should be thinking further ahead than all of this, and taking the council to people. But on this one, we're talking about May and June here, and I know Margot's focused on that quite rightly. I think we should be meeting in person, but it can't be in the council chambers. We shouldn't be going back to that. It's not fit for purpose, and there are plenty of places in Angus large enough to accommodate us quite comfortably. As many people have said, we just need to look out there and get it and plan for that for May. We have be having to bring extra cost into the chamber anyway, as Mrs. Williamson said, to do the sound and the visual side of it anyway. But for these, it's just for these two meetings at the moment. We should be planning ahead and finding a place where we can all meet comfortably and think to the future rather than the past.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Councillor Cheap. Remember, we're just talking about two meetings, but anyway, Councillor Boyd, your comment.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I've listened to quite a few of the councillors around this table saying they have no emotional attachment to chamber. I think quite a few of us actually said that. There's going to be even less emotional attachment to the, will it be around about a dozen or so new members? I went to the meeting last night as well, and saw a mixture of people who I think will be on their fourth booster by the time, by their age profile, will be on their fourth booster by the time we get ourselves in May. And then I saw an awful lot of young people, and that was lovely to see some young people coming into local politics. And they will have no personal attachment to it. They will not see it as our chamber. I don't think they think there is anything to do with having a chamber anymore. I don't think they'll want to see somebody sitting there with a set of chains on. I genuinely believe that. So, or standing up for the provost coming in. I think it's an old style. It was very honourable when it was happening, but it was an old style thing. And I don't therefore think we need to have this in that physical chamber. All we're needing is a big room with a square table, with someone where the provost to be at one end, and everyone will get the same thing. Well, you could have a dress rehearsal. You know, you could have when we're doing our shows, as an example, we do it we have a purpose-built rehearsal room that mirrors the high school stage. There's no reason for it. And then that maybe that building that we find will become the building that we'll use in the future. So back to what Councillor Moore said, I think he's absolutely right. I can't see any reason whatsoever why it couldn't be done in Angus House.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Boyd. Councillor Speed, your comment?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Just to confirm, my camera's not working today, so that's why you're not seeing me. Yeah, lots of really valid points being raised and concerns being raised today. I think we need to be mindful as well of, you know, our workforce, some of our workforce being asked to work from home, although I have received assurances that there will always be that option to go into an office space to work as well. For me, I probably do feel a little bit emotionally attached to the chamber. I recognise the challenges within it, absolutely, in terms of space. But I guess the ambience of the chamber, along with perhaps that shock of being elected and that kind of privilege that it was, I kind of feel that there's something there that perhaps those that are elected maybe need to get that chance to experience and then decide whether it's something or some place that they wish to then carry on operating from and conducting meetings from. So I guess, yeah, I can understand the challenges around the chamber, but perhaps it's for those that are elected to decide. Bearing in mind as well, we also don't know what the access requirements will be of some of the new elected members. But I think, yeah, where I want to kind of end up with saying is that I think I agree in principle that coming into council, I certainly can't imagine coming in as a newly elected member and not meeting face to face. I do feel that there's something that gets lost online and there isn't that same opportunity to network and get to know really quickly. So I do support that wherever it may be, that there is that opportunity for face-to-face meetings, certainly initially, until the new council decides on what direction they want to go in.
Okay, thank you very much. Macmillan Douglas.
Thank you, Provost. 2 points really. First, I agree with those who say that the first meeting or two have to be in person. I can't really see how that we a proper functioning council with the networking, with people seeing what was going on, and building up relationships if we didn't meet in person. So sorry, it won't be me if the council does not meet in person. So I support that for the first 2 meetings at least. Personally, I do quite like the chamber. I completely agree with all Councillor Speed's sentiments that she expressed, and I certainly couldn't express them better than she did. But having said that, if people are concerned about the chamber, we mustn't lose the in-person meetings. So there are lots of other places. There's Reed Hall, there's Kirry Town Hall. I mean, people have been mentioning other places as we've been going. All right, they cost a little bit of money, and there is a financial element to this, and the public may look at that financial element, but that would all have to be bottomed out. In conclusion, I would say I think the council needs to meet in person for at least the first 2 meetings, if not more. And it would, if people do not like the chamber.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Macmillan Douglas. I think we've actually, colleagues, I think we've actually gone round this now, and as Councillor Fairweather said, we could go around in circles. And all I would remind colleagues that if we approve the recommendation, recommendation 3 is really that they agrees the meeting of the full council in May, the statutory meeting, and in June to be held in person in the council chambers, will also be live streamed in, and that is subject to what the rules and regulations are at the time. And we're only talking about these 2 meetings. And you know, everything else, what everyone else has said, I take cognizance of. And you know, Councillor MacDonald, you know, he's what he's saying about COVID. I actually, you know, take cognizance of what's been said. I've got Councillor Bell, Councillor Cheap, and Councillor Whiteside with their hands up. So I'll speak to Councillor Bell first.
Thank you. Could I propose alternative venue in person, please, to be explored and decided by officers that's appropriate? regardless of what the Scottish Government says the restrictions are. I just think it's safety first from my point of view, and the chamber is far too tight. It would just not make me feel comfortable at all, and it's about other people's safety as well. So I'd be happy to support the first 2 meetings in person in a different venue to be decided by officers.
I would second that, Councillor Bell.
Could I just, the Chief Executive, just let the Chief Executive reply on this?
Provost, I mean, I've listened very carefully to what people have said, but the options have been working schools, the Saltire Centre, which is an Angus Alive venue, hotels. We would need to look at all the financial implications associated with that. There's also the consideration of lighting and sound, and that would come into account for someplace like a wing of Angus House. I think it would be a different paper that members are looking for, and I would propose that we hear from Jackie Buchanan around what the system would be to do that, given that this is the last council meeting, in order to do what members are asking, because this does require something quite different from what's been proposed presently in item 10.
Right, thanks very much for that, Margot. Jackie Buchanan.
Thank you, Provost. As the Executive has said, what's being proposed now is really quite a significant amendment to the recommendations, and there's a process and standing orders for that to be done, not least as the Chief Executive has alluded to look at the financial implications of these alternatives, and none of that process has been followed, of course. So it makes it quite challenging now for officers to try and accommodate what members seem to be wishing to be done, because we haven't looked at the costs of alternative venues. We've looked at what's detailed in the report, and the papers have been put out on that basis, and we haven't received any amendments formally in terms of the missives, and I don't think, I'll check with Mr. Lorimer, but I don't think he's been approached for advice on the financial implications of using an alternative venue. So in the circumstances, Mr. Lorimer, could you clarify if that's the case, please, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I'm happy to confirm that I've not had any discussions around an alternative approach on this one. Thank you.
And I hear what you're saying is that, for any amendment, we have not got the opportunity to judge whether it is financially competent or not in the time given. I think that's what you're saying. And there we have it, colleagues.
Right. Thanks, Provost. Probably either I'm moving an amendment or or a motion. As I say, we could go round and round in circles with this one. And I think today, what we should be doing is agree the recommendations with the change to 3, as the chief executive says, with a further recommendation that if the guidance states it can't be done, that those meetings are virtual.
No, that's not the.
We could also add, that further options are looked at regarding what venue it would be in. That should cover everything that everybody in this virtual chamber has asked today.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, are you happy that Mrs. Williamson? Have we amend the report slightly to say that we'll look at other potential venues as recommended by Councillor Fairweather?
I think there's probably an issue around that to do with finance, and I would ask Ian Lorimer to come in, because it would need to be financially competent.
Okay, Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. Going back to the standing orders and Standing Order 16.9, I think it is, in relation to proposals that will have financial implications. It's really about being clear about what the financial implications would be, so that members can make an informed decision. We could certainly investigate what other venues are available, but we really don't know whether those would bring in additional costs, and if they did, what that would entail. I think the pricing that's been done for this report in terms of the audio and assumption of the chamber. So we're in a slightly difficult position in terms of being able to agree something around looking at a different venue, because we haven't actually done any investigations, as the Chief Executive has said, around what that might entail financially. So a bit difficult for me to advise on that one in those circumstances.
Provost, can I come back on that then? Right, and perhaps a way forward.
Please do. Please do.
Right, right. Obviously, right, with the further recommendations that have guidance states that and we have to do them virtual. With the further recommendations that we look at other venues and the financial implications involved.
Could I make a comment, Provost?
Councillor Hans had a point of order.
Jackie Buchanan.
Provost, I see that Councillor Hans has a point of order that she wishes to make, but I'm happy to. It's up to yourself in terms of that. I was just going to.
Please carry on, because I'd rather the officers give the input, and then we'll come back onto the councillor's comments.
Okay, thank you, Provost. I appreciate Councillor Fairweather's trying to get a way forward in terms of a solution, but in relation to us looking at alternative options, the problem that we have, of course, is the next meeting is the meeting that we're speaking about. And in order for members to have the financial information and take a decision on that, we don't have a meeting in between then and now. The only other option, I guess, is to try and see if we can look at a delegation, but bearing in mind that the keen interest of all members and evidence today, I'm not thinking that would be the best way forward either.
I mean, would it be possible for us to have a special meeting just today to giving time to examine the options and just have it as a one agenda item and we deal with it then? Would that be possible?
What I could suggest, Councillor Proctor, before we go to that extent, because clearly another council meeting, when there's one already planned, I think during the period because of other aspects, that perhaps I could suggest we have a recess for 15 minutes and I could discuss the matter with Mr. Lorimer and Ms. Williamson, and also actually with Sharon Faulkner, who will be involved in the logistics of this.
Yeah,
I point of order as well first before we
go on. What's your point of order?
Yeah, it was just to clarify, Provost. Recommendation 1 states it's been a material change in circumstances. Given that we think the legislation is going to change on the 21st of March, that actual change of circumstance actually hasn't taken place yet. So I suppose ultimately, is it not yourself that has the decision as to whether a material change of circumstance has actually taken place? The assumption in the paper that it has.
Yeah, we're actually preempting that, Councillor Hans. But I think the best way forward, because we want to move on with this, is we have a recess for 15 minutes. If we come back at 16:37, okay, 16:37. We break off now, and then we can discuss this. I'll discuss this and with the officers, and then we come back to see if we can find a way forward. Okay.
Okay.
So we close now. If councillors are reminded that we have a recess now for 15 minutes. Come back at 16. In fact, it will be 16:38. Okay. Thank you.
Restart. John, could you?
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, He's going to call on Mrs. Williamson to just address the council. Margot?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Obviously, I've had the strength of feeling from members about our current chamber, and I think, as the report states, that there will be a further report in June for the new council to look at solutions. But during the recess, I've had a meeting with my directors, and I'm quite willing to look at the possibility of any venues and costs associated with them. I think there are challenges with that, as I explained earlier, around some of the venues that have been mentioned about being working schools, hotels, some of them belonging to Angus Alive, availability. As you know, some of them have already been retained for other purposes. But we'll do that. We will do that. And when we meet again on the 24th of March, we'll bring an updated paper to Council for you to consider. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mrs. Williamson. So I would recommend that we note the recommendations and that a further report will be brought forward to Council on the 24th of March.
Agreed.
Right, thank you, colleagues.
Yep, agreed.
Thank you. Colleagues, we'll move on.
Agreed, and thank you very much, Margot.
Thanks, Margot.
Right, we'll now move on to item 11, which is the draft national planning framework.
Could I just ask Councillor McMillan Douglas to leave the meeting?
Yeah, I'm just going to do that.
Yep, I'll leave now.
And before we move on, I'm just going to ask my colleague Councillor McMillan Douglas to leave the meeting as he declared an interest. Sarah was beat me to it. And I'm asked Jill, Miss Jill Patterson, if she would lead on this report. Jill.
Thank you, Provost. I'm actually going to get my colleague Ms. Hay report just to give you an introduction to this.
Right.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you. This report introduces Scottish Government's current consultation on Draft National Planning Framework 4, providing an overview setting out the main implications for Angus and the key matters that are recommended for inclusion in the Council's response to the consultation. On the 10th of November 2021, the Scottish Government published the consultation draft of their fourth National Planning Framework and laid it before Parliament. It reflects priorities across a range of Scottish Government portfolios and attempts to bring together the provisions of a range of plans, programmes and policies at the national level to be delivered collaboratively. They've committed to revisiting the document before laying a final version in Parliament for approval in summer of 2022. Scottish Government can then adopt National Planning Framework, and it would then form part of the Statute Development Plan under the provisions of the Planning Scotland Act 2019. That legislation has determined the status of NPF4 as being part of the development plan, and neither current nor previous versions have had this status. So in practice, this means that the National Planning Framework will have a prominent role in guiding preparation of local development plans and other policies and strategies relating to land use, as well as influencing all development proposals across Scotland. Development proposals and decisions on planning applications taken by the local planning authority would need to be in alignment with the policies and provisions of the National Planning Framework. It recognises the pivotal role of local authorities to help deliver the strategy through enabling future investment and transforming places. This document will set the context for determination of a 20-year spatial strategy for Angus, which would be set out in the next local development plan. The future land use and policy strategy for Angus would then need to sit fully within the context of National Planning Framework 4, supporting the right development in the right places. At this stage, this paper proposes matters for inclusion in the Council's response, and those focus on matters considered to be potentially significant to the future of Angus, as well as issues which might affect the continued delivery of a quality planning service in Angus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Jill, is there anything else you want to add in?
No, I think Nicola's provided a good overview for members.
That's fine. Right, colleagues, I just ask any questions on this report. Any comments? No questions or comments, then other recommendations in paragraph 1 agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Can you call back Councillor McMillan Douglas, please? Just a way to get Councillor McMillan Douglas back in, and then we'll move up when he's here. We'll then move on to item 12, place-based investment programme and place strategy. But waiting on Councillor McMillan Douglas. He's probably making a cup of tea. Yeah. All right, I've been informed that Councillor McMillan Douglas is now back in. We now move on to item 12, place-based investment programme and place strategy 2022. And I'm going to ask Alison Smith if she would like to introduce us, please. Alison.
Thank you. I actually have Audrey Meekey's author of the report, and she's going to give you an overview.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. This report provides details and background on the financial allocation of the 2022-23 Scottish Government Place-Based Investment Programme. The idea is that the programme aims to ensure that all place-based investments are shaped by the needs and aspirations of local communities to actions for placemaking. Since there are 4 years left of this programme, we intend to cast the net wide with an expressions of interest stage to understand the aspirations of the communities before inviting projects, both internal and external, to the application stage. We can then work with groups that need support with their projects or capacity building. The new process and criteria have been laid out within the content of the report, and we're looking for the committee to agree the process for the distribution of the funds noted on point 5, agree the scoring criteria in 5.3, give emergency delegated authority just in case it's required, and agree officers to start the consultation and engagement process over the summer months with the communities in Angus, with the view to bring back a police strategy and place-based plans as per the members' session discussion a few weeks ago to a committee later in the year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Audrey. Questions, Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Audrey. I welcome this report. However, I have a query, and it might be an omission, so it may well be done. I was querying the absence of a Fairer Scotland duty equality impact assessment. For me, it's completely relevant to this strategy, and given that it is involving funding, it really needs to be carried out. You might have one done, but it's not attached to the paper, so I was quite concerned about that. Thanks.
Okay, Audrey, do you want to reply, please?
Yeah, of course. So the paper today is really just approving that we really go ahead with the criteria and the process. Once applications come in and we know what we're funding the applications to, there'll then be inequalities and a Fairer Scotland assessment done at that point when we come back to committee with the findings, with the information on what projects are going to get funded.
Can I come back, please, Provost?
Yes, please.
I would have thought that would have been a required document from the outset, Audrey, and I think it's helpful to be able to think of everything in an integrated way. even at this stage. I think it needs to be there from the beginning. So I would welcome that kind of from the outset model, if that's okay in future. I think we need to do these things in tandem so that we don't miss anything, and that we can look forward and have all of these ideas and thoughts and mitigations in our head from the very beginning. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Audrey, do you want to reply?
No, it's absolutely noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks for that, Audrey. I was just wondering if you've got any more information around what form the engagement exercise will take and how we can ensure we reach all the relevant people.
Yeah, sorry, can I come back in? For the strategy over the summer itself, or for the place-based investment, or both?
You're muted, Councillor Whiteside.
Yeah, just in terms of making sure you reach the people so that everybody knows about it.
Yeah, it's going to be done through an expression of interest that will be circulated quite widely through all our contacts in Angus, through all councillors, through community councils, and through all our community groups. It'll be an actual form with specific criteria on the fund for expressions of interest really to come forward. The idea for this is that some projects will be ready to go to application stage. Some projects will need some capacity building and will need some support for future years, because this is, obviously a 4-year fund, and it's really just to get a really good idea, everything that's out there within Angus with community groups and what the aspirations really are.
Okay, thank you very much, Audrey. Happy with that?
Yeah, it's just it's good to know that councillors and all community councils will be involved at this stage.
Yeah, agreed. Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Yes, thanks, Audrey. I think you just answered much of my question, because I was going to ask something similar to what Councillor Whiteside said. I think it would be good if the councillors can be given something that can be circulated, particularly on social media, because we will. That's been maybe it's been lacking before. I think we've not really had the opportunity to actually. I hear what you're trying to say about getting it out there, but we know our towns, our boroughs, we know people and groups, and we will get it circulated through our own means as well to reiterate what you're trying to do. So that was a point, but the question I really got for you is on a timeline on this, because looking through the paper, it mentioned that a lot of these projects have to be delivered by, I think it was March 2023. So what's the timeline here for when applications have to be in? We get to know how long they've got, because when they hear about this, first of all, that's only then they might start thinking about what they want to do. So they need time to think about it before they even know how they're going to actually carry it all out. So it always seems a bit rushed in all these things. So the sooner we get out there, the better, but we need to know a timeline.
Can you answer that, Audrey? I mean, a very relevant point.
Of course, and I totally agree, Councillor Cheap, and I think that has been the issue, and certainly been the issue in past with, when we've been getting yearly funds. I think there's 2 points to this. I think for this year in particular, the reason that we do the expression of interest and then applications will go for invite only, and that'll go to projects that really are ready and that we can see match the criteria and can be deliverable. Although it's a 4-year fund, the Scottish Government have still stipulated that each year contracts have to be committed or started by the 31st of March. There is a small bit of leeway at the other end with transferring extending funds, but that March 31st is set in stone. We would be looking for projects that's pretty much ready to go, shuffle ready. However, the idea for putting a really wide expressions of interest out is to understand what, you know, seed thoughts are out there with the communities and what projects we can give extra officer support to work up for future years of the fund. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Audrey. I always say to community councils in my ward, have the projects sitting in the shelf, and then when the time comes, you can just pull them down. But thank you for that. Councillor Speed, your question?
Yeah, it's kind of already been answered, Provost. It was around kind of that community engagement and also just concerns around the tight timescales for delivery. So yeah, hopefully we can have some good PR, good circulation amongst the groups and the community. And yeah, hopefully if they've got projects sitting ready to go, then they'll be able to respond quickly. But yeah, it is a concern around, again, you know, a huge amount of money. And the benefits are there, but just the tight timescales for being able to deliver on it.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Speed. Do you want to reply, Audrey? I think you actually have to the previous questions. I think you have.
Yeah, I would probably just offer some reassurance that, you know, with regards to behind the scenes, the process, you know, we're ready to go with the expressions of interest. We're actually ready to go with the grant letters. The whole process has been built up and is ready to deliver. So, you know, I appreciate all the concerns, and I think we just have to get that wide circulation and make sure that we stick to the timeline.
Thank you very much.
Audrey.
Okay, thanks, Audrey. Before I ask Councillor Moore, I just want to remind you that in 5 minutes' time we will have come up to the 3-hour period, and in accordance with Standing Order 21.8, I'd just like to ask you, would you like to agree that we continue until the conclusion of business?
Continue. Agreed.
Continue.
Yes,
agreed.
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 Thank you. Councillor Moore.
We've noticed in previous years that those who are used to going for grants and the like are the people who are getting most of the money. What officer time, experience, assistance will be offered to those who aren't, for want of a better phrase, professional money grabbers? Or, you know, how much time can we give to say a group who have never tried before?
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Moore. Audrey?
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Yeah, that is one of the areas within the working on. We've got a team of community development officers that have got the experience to work with a whole range of projects, but we're actually in the process at the minute of pulling in additional external help. We last week with Business Gateway, who are going to come in and work with officers as well to advise groups on financials, on cash flows, on business plans, etc. And we are starting to reach out and starting to map the external agencies like the Scottish Civic Trust and the Scottish Land Trust, Scottish Land Commission, that can come in and support community groups and organisations. So Councillor Mayor, we'll have our own officers on the ground that can help groups from a seed thought to form a group, to constitute a group, and to really take it right up to, you know, developing assets, etc. However, we are looking at that external support that's available as well, and that's something that we're really pushing forward with right at the moment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a good answer, good question. Councillor Boyd?
Means a comment?
Question? Are we going to comment? Any other questions? Any other questions?
Looks like Sheila does first.
Is that a question, Councillor Hans?
Provost, I was just wondering, Audrey, if you can tell us, will there be any measurement of the impact of the projects funded as well? And I'm kind of coming on to some comments that Councillor made earlier in terms of, and I'm glad you've agreed to the EIA at an earlier stage as well. A member who said there was a view about some people are better at asking for funds and getting funding than others as well. So how do we make sure that the funding that's being awarded is being inclusive? So will there be an element of monitoring the impact and the breadth of the funding and lessons learned?
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Hans. I think Audrey answered some of that in reply to Councillor Moore's question, but Audrey, could you enlarge on it for Councillor Hans, please?
Absolutely. We're starting to move more towards that output monitoring, and with the new grant letters that we have got ready to go, there's more evaluation and output forms included in that, so that we can monitor a whole range of factors, from job supported, youth supported, assets taken back into use, a whole range of things, Councillor Hand, and that's going to be as part of the evaluation, that if it's an internal project or an external project, that information will have to be provided as part of the application. I hope that helps.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Hans?
It was more in terms of different protected characteristics, and to ensure people on low incomes are benefit, people from more disadvantaged groups that don't necessarily always benefit from activities in their local area as well. So it was more on an equalities perspective, but what you've said, Audrey, was helpful in itself as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Hans. Comments now, Councillor Boyd. You'll be sitting there patiently.
Bonnie, I'm never patient.
Well,
it was just to say, Audrey, thank you very much as a first report. I think it's 4 months to the day that we had our first conversations about everything in your new role. So thank you very much. You're certainly hitting the ground running, and it's wonderful breath of fresh air to see things moving forward. So thank you very much for your inputs.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Boyd. I would agree with you entirely. Any other comments? Okay, colleagues, no further comments. Are the recommendations in paragraph 1 agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. We're now going to item 13, Angus Alive update, and I now ask Vivian Smith if she would just give us a lead on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Really, this is a very brief report. It's following on from the report Council heard at the last meeting. We've managed to look to see the opportunity for opening up some of the swimming facilities in Arbroath and Forfar and Kirriemuir, and really just looking to seek approval for this. It's a good news story. It will certainly help the schools and the clubs locally, as well as make some provision for weekend swimming provision in Kirriemuir.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Vivian. Councillor Boyd, question? You're muted, Councillor Boyd.
Sorry, it was a previous hand. My apologies for that.
Okay, beg your pardon. Councillor McMillan Douglas.
Thank you, Provost. It's a question and a comment, or the other way around. I'd very much like to welcome the opening up of the swimming pool in Kirriemuir on a Saturday. Difference to young people being able to get out and take exercise and enjoy their recreations after so much lockdown. I'm really just asking reassurance that you're still reviewing with Angus Alive the possibility of having the swimming pool open on Sundays, which is true in some other boroughs.
Vivian?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Thanks, Councillor McMillan Douglas. Certainly, we're reviewing all of the services that Angus Alive are providing across Angus at the moment. Yeah, I think everyone's aware of the financial challenges coming out of the pandemic, and some of those are continuing. And I think the report I brought last time to Council was saying that we would be bringing a transformational project through for consideration in June, and I would hope that we would be addressing all aspects of provision, whether that be the swimming or the libraries or the sports and leisure centres, etc. But I do hear you about, you know, the need for health and well-being and supporting people to have access to the facilities, and we'll do everything we can to work with Angus Alive to open as many to open as many provisions as they can financially sustain. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You happy with that?
I'm almost completely happy, yes.
Any other questions? Any other comments? Is there recommendations in paragraph 1? Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Item 14 is a possible exclusion of the public and press. In terms of standing order 28.2, do we agree to exclude the public and press, considering that items 15 and 16 are exempt in terms of Part 1 of Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Provost, we'll just
Disconnect.